a lot of cops. I've seen a lot of lawyers. Well, I won't stop. I've seen a lot of children with their parents in their hands. I felt a lot of women refuse to understand. Well, I don't think I understand why we're making such a fuss. And I don't think I understand what's come of all of us. And I don't think I understand why we take this world for granted. I just want to get right back to Guitar Players Planet. You see it in the papers, you read it every day. The riots and the fires going on in South LA. The muggers and the government, they're all wanting the same thing. They take all your money and whatever else bring. Well, I don't think I understand why we're making such a fuss. And I don't think I understand what's come of all of us. And I don't think I understand why we take this world for granted. I just want to get right back to Guitar Players Planet. Take me. And I don't think I understand what's come of all of us. And I don't think I understand why we take this world for granted. I just want to get right back to Guitar Players Planet. 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 Guitar Players Planet.
Down by the water, maybe I'm the sun, maybe I'm a daughter when the music man calls. That's when I gotta play. For the things I never had,
Sunny skies, the smell of palm tree air. Looking back, I could never feel fair. The way the music has touched my soul, the way that the South holds its control. But I've got a new way to choose. I'm gonna start running back to the lands of the new. Oh, na 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 na. Seems to me that I have lost my friend. Got the sunset on the highway again. Then I get lost on a long summer day. I must go back before it's too late. You're afraid, you're feeling alone. Time and space can never unfold. The holidays can ring in your fear. The ghostly embrace can only me tears. And I've got a new way to choose. I'm gonna start running back to lands of blue. Oh, na 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 na. Sitting at the lake, I'm feeling confused, but I had my guitar, so I played Mr. Blues. But I'm afraid, what might be true, that I might never be back again. Seems to me that I have lost my friend. Got the sunset off the highway again. Then I get lost on a long summer day. I must be back before it's too late. Before it's too late.
Someone to take me down at night. Someone to make my day. New revelation fills my soul. Oh, I can waste away. You distracting my attention. You're all that's on my mind. You not looking for perfection, but you're too hard to find. Now the first night is coming. you. Oh, you. All right. Where did my color go? Got your head in the sand. You can't be in control, using a powerful hand. I wanna be ya, I wanna see ya. Don't taste the kisses of hate. Don't try to tell me, don't try to sell me, don't try to say it's too late. You're gonna push me to the edge, back me in a corner, making me stand in your shoes. Push me to the edge, hide a little color, it's black and white and blue. Black and white and blue, yeah. All right. Cat learns to ring a bell. Rat gets free from the maze. We can be taught to love. We've got to learn to wait. I wanna see you, I wanna be you. Don't taste the kisses of hate. Don't try to tell me, don't try to sell me, don't try to say it's too late. You're gonna push me to the edge, back me in a corner, making me stand in your shoes. Push me to the edge, add a little color, it's black and white and blue. Black and white and blue. Yeah. I wanna be, I wanna see, don't taste the kisses of hate. Don't try to tell me, don't try to sell me, don't try to say it's too late. Push me to the edge, back me in a corner, making me stand in your shoes. Push me to the edge, add a little color, it's black and white and blue. Yeah, black and white and blue. You're going black and white on the edge, back me in a corner, making me stand in your shoes. Push me to the edge, add a little color, it's black and white and blue. Black and white and blue.
Sunny skies, the smell of country air. Looking back, I could never feel fair. The way the music has touched my soul, the way that the South holds its control. But I've got a new way to choose. I'm gonna start running back to the lands of new. Oh, na 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 na. That I have lost my friend. Got the sunset off the highway again. Then I get lost on a long summer day. I must go back before it's too late. You're afraid, you're feeling alone. Time and space can never unfold.
Hello, everybody. We are here again, another Wednesday. Would you believe it? It's 2023. This is the first show.
Merry New Year!
Happy New Year! But yeah, our little Dan Aykroyd / Eddie Murphy thing going on. But everybody, welcome to another. And I got to apologize. I was I was having so much fun doing all the new titles and everything. I forgot to change it. This is the first episode of season 4. So I'm going to have to change it. First episode of season 4, episode number 221. So unbelievable. Yeah,
We need to get syndicated. I want royalties.
Right? even Star Trek got syndicated in like 73. I mean, come on, so but we're here today, and we're so happy to have Don Goldman. Many of you know him from Astrodon filters, and we are extremely honored to have you here, Don. Thank you so much for coming on. Why don't you introduce yourself a little quick, and for maybe some of the new people that are out there that don't know about you, or and what you've been doing.
Whoa. Hello, everyone. Okay. Coming through okay?
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah, it'll be fun tonight. We're going to mix it up a little bit and have a little slideshow of some of my photos, and then get into a PowerPoint presentation where we might just talk about filters.
Maybe we might do that.
So I started in this at about 2000, and attended a local astronomy club, and a guy brought out an ST7. I don't know if you guys remember that. That's one of SBIG's first cameras.
Yes, I do.
And I live in the same sort of city environment that Dan does. I mean, in megs per square arcsecond, I'm somewhere around 17 or 18, something like that, which means, the only way I'm going to see the Milky Way in my backyard is with a glass of scotch and a good imagination, because it just ain't happening. So I got into it like everybody else did. I got into it really fast. It was technical. My background's technical. I loved it. Once you've kind of figured out how to put a system together from 14 different manufacturers, and you think you're done, then you look at, how am I going to process the data? And you got yourself on another learning curve that never seems to end, but it's always challenging. And from what I loved back then is the first time I pressed enter on the computer and saw the color image take place from all of the different subs. That's what really kept me going, because I knew that nobody on the planet has ever seen that object like we can when we take our deep exposures and then put it in the computer and process it. So that kept me going for a long time. Saw some problems with the early filters in the 2000s. Like I took an image of the Dumbbell Nebula with two sets of filters, two different companies, and it turned out blue in one and kind of magenta in the other. And I said, it's the same object, same night. Something's really weird. And that kind of led me into develop filters that led to the Astrodon company, which allowed me to buy all of my expensive toys for about 15 years. So I sold much of my equipment back in about 2018 and kind of retired. But I miss it, and I think about getting back into it every day. But these guys just showed me all sorts of technology I've never seen before. And I'm saying, I don't know whether I want to learn all that stuff now. So, anyway,
This is your
I
next
think we'll
level.
have, yeah, what the hell is that? Anyway, thanks for putting up with this introduction, but we'll talk at you later.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. So let's really quick, let's talk about the sponsors. And Eric, I'm going to let you hold the reins when we get to RFT, because I've been kind of stealing your thunder the past couple of weeks by doing it. But you know what? We're going to let you talk about RFT for a little bit this time, because my throat is kind of, but so let's get the sponsors rolling here. There we go. And for our first sponsor, for those of you that don't know, we do a lot of giveaways, and we have a lot of sponsors that actually give us the either cash or the product to give away for free. And they've been really, really generous. And the first one that we have is Woodland Hills Camera and Telescopes, which has given us $50 gift certificates for almost, I don't know, it's been about a year now, right, Pete? It's been a while. And we just gave away a $250 gift certificate to somebody for Christmas. I forget who it was, but we gave away a $250 gift certificate to somebody for Christmas. So that made somebody a very happy person there. So Woodland Hills. Also, we have our Red Giant level sponsors, Prima Luce. We gave away an Eagle 4 in July, a $3,000 computer for the most part. Camera Concepts gives us gift certificates every month. Optolong Filters. Sorry, Don. Optolong Filters has been very gracious to us in giving us a lot of narrowband and broadband filters. So thank you to them as well. And Masters of Pixinsight and IP for AP. So far, everybody with the exception of one has agreed to continue their sponsorship into 2023. I'm waiting on an answer for one more. Masters of Pixinsight said we'll do whatever we can to be your number one sponsor. So they have now given us more classes and more IP for AP yearly subscriptions for 2023. So thank you to them as well. Pete, Ron, and Warren over there. So thank you. Again, can't do anything about anything without people to watch us or to help us with our progress on the shows. So we have a lot of member sponsors. So thank you to our Quasar members, our Dark Black Hole members, Red Giant, Main Sequence. We have about 60 members now, and I'm going to change this real quick so you guys can see the live feed. Give me 1 second, and outputs. And so now you guys will be able to see the live feed. I apologize about that. It was now you can see the Main Sequence members, but we have a whole bunch of members that are on Patreon and on YouTube that contribute to the channel. So thank you so much, Protostar members as well. Everybody that supported us over the past 3 years, thank you so much. And if you would like to become a member sponsor, feel free to hit us up on YouTube or on our Patreon membership, and you get some specialized content from there. So you might want to check that out. tonight is January 4th. We got Don Goldman with us from Astrodon Filters, as you know, and we're going to be getting back to Don really quick very soon. But coming up in a week from tonight, and I'm going to let Eric take this one. Week from tonight, we have Carlos Aragon from RFT Stars. So, Eric, why don't you just give us a rundown on what's going on with RFT?
RFT Stars, or Reach for the Stars, is a nonprofit that is based in, I believe, Tucson, Arizona. And Carlos and his wife are military veterans that have led the crusade, I would want to say, to help children in their area that deal with a lot of the mental health issues that we hear so much about affecting children today. They do it through astronomy on how to turn that negative energy of that mental illness, be it cyberbullying, bullying, maybe even dealing with disabilities, depression, high anxiety, things like that. All the things that maybe we at their age really didn't deal with, or really it wasn't out in the forefront as it is right now, especially even with teen and young suicide, things like that. And what Carlos and Reach for the Stars do, they work with families and work with these kids to let them know how special they are. And they do it through astronomy. They let them know that there is a much bigger and wider world and universe out there, and let them know that they are special. And what we're going to do is next week, Carlos is going to come on and give a bit of a presentation about what he and his wife and the partners there, that the people that partner with RFT Stars do to help these children and help these families get through a lot of the tough times that kids nowadays are going through. It's not easy, for a lot of to be a kid, nowadays in certain aspects, and they do what they can through astronomy and through STEM classes and general outreach to help these children and help their community out. And so next week, I really would like everyone's support and to share this show and share with their friends and family, even if they're not into astronomy, to come on and check out next week's show and help Reach for the Stars. And help them, continue to do what incredible work they're already doing.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so we'll definitely come on down and take a look and learn a little bit. And again, remember, bring the checkbook. It is a fundraiser. It is a fundraiser. So we're going to be doing more and more of these, maybe like 3 or 4 a year, once a quarter. There are some really worthwhile organizations out there that need help. And this is the second one now that we're doing. So it's going to be really, really fun. So I'm looking forward to doing that. So that being said, we have more. Why'd that happen? I don't know why that happened. Quick play. Okay, and 4 up and live. So we also have Craig Stocks coming in on the 25th. So don't forget that as well. So we're pretty booked up for this month, but it's going to be a stocked couple of weeks. It's going to be a lot of fun. So come on down, check us out. If you like us, please hit that like button. Please subscribe to the channel, and don't forget us. Because without the people, we got nothing. So let's keep on doing what we're doing and build the community. So thank you so much. So that being said, we are back with Don Goldman from Astrodon. And Don has asked me to play a video of his, right, Don?
Yeah.
And we're going to play that video. It's a 5-minute video. And it's basically, Don, why don't you say what the video is about real quick? You know, what we're going to see.
It's just a collection of some of my favorite images taken over the years.
And these are images all taken by you with scopes all over the world, pretty much.
Scopes, yeah, scopes all over the world. I tried to image locally. I live in Sacramento. So as I said, the skies are pretty bad here. But fortunately, Astrodon was able to allow me to get my scopes and put them in remote observatories in Chile, at Sierra Remote, in near Fresno, near Yosemite. And for the last probably dozen years, I was down at itelescopes.net at Siding Spring.
Nice.
Go Southern Hemisphere, you know, it's kind of like going into a new candy shop. Every flavor is different, and you don't seem to run out of choices. So I've been all around, but fortunately, the business helped pay for all of that.
That is awesome. So without further ado, let's go to Don's video, and here we go. It's about 5 minutes long, but here we go. A second.
Da, 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 da. Hey, oh, that's right. We need the theme song from Star Wars.
And I pause it for a second. Hold on.
Well, it was there, but he can't play it on YouTube. We have to use different music for the video. Uh-oh. Now you know where George Lucas got it. I don't hear any music.
Casey, he might not. Hold on a second. Hold on a second.
Oh, that's okay. If they can hear it, that's great.
Took everything that I had, yeah. Walked away, but you left one thing behind. You're wondering just what that is. Yes, you are. And the world stops spinning around, I'll be rocking. When the wall comes tumbling down, I'll be there. When the world stops spinning around, I'll be rocking. We're gonna make a little love down by the water. Maybe I'm the sun, maybe I'm a daughter when the music man calls. That's when I gotta play. So I burn for the things I never had. I'm burning with hate, with love. Spin around, round. 'Cause as a boy I had a dream. Carry it with me today. Yes, I do. When the world stops spinning around, I'll be rocking. When the walls come tumbling down, I'll be there. When So I came here alone, feeling heat and the world coming over me. Got a way of your own, but I told you that life ain't a fantasy. Now I watch you every day. Turn it up, it's just your way. Rocket fuel runs through your brain, like I told you on the train, that it's the only thing she knows. The only thing she knows. The only thing she knows. That it's the only thing she knows. She knows. So it started to rain. Met a woman with eyes like a hurricane. Told her she was the one. And she looked at the moon, calling me insane.
And there we
Nice.
go.
Thanks.
Those are some very nice images.
Thank you.
Unbelievable. The detail that you got in that rosette at the end. We were looking at that over a couple of different objects that our members have taken, and those globules that you have, and all the detail in the dark nebula that you have inside that, it's just unreal. It's really crazy.
Take a guess at how many hours of exposures that one shot took. It's not a mosaic. It's a straight shot out of one of the big, I think the 20-inch scope that was in Australia at Sighting Spring. Take a guess of how many hours of exposure.
5.
40.
Oh, okay, 40. That's not so bad.
Yeah.
40 in Australia is like 200 in New York. So,
and Don, that was with CCD cameras, no algorithms that we have today when it comes to post-processing. I mean, there's a lot of work involved in that. And it just goes to show you the detail that you put into it and the due diligence.
Yeah, we fought a lot of noise back then. I don't know what your CMOS cameras are giving you these days, but the 16803 chips that we use, I think were like 9 to 10 electrons. And if I've scoured the internet properly, it looks like the ZO and the QHY cameras, the CMOS cameras are down at 1.
Yep.
Yes.
That's
or less.
incredible.
Or less.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing.
So that really helps a lot too.
Were you using some DL or using Image Plus? What was the software that you're using back then for those?
I tried so hard over the years to learn Pixinsight, but I ended up staying with the original software. The telescope control, the guiding and everything was done in Maxim. I used Stanley Moore's CCD Stack 2.0 for all of the registration, calibration. At the time, there was a CCD Inspector plugin that you could use that did the registration. It was fantastic at deconvolution. And so I stayed with that, and out of that came 16-bit TIFFs. And from there, I went into Photoshop. So it was basically Maxim with the equipment, into CCD Stack for registration calibration, and then into hours and hours of layers and layers of Photoshop. My goal was always to try and make our 2D images look a little bit more 3D. Because, they're so far away, they're all in focus. I mean, but there's things you can do, like in a spiral galaxy, to make the arms kind of look like they're closer to you. You can brighten them up, you can sharpen them up, you can make the spaces between the spiral arms a little darker.
Yep.
And that was the game we kind of played back then. How can we bring these 2D images, these flat images, alive? But that was my image processing procedure back then.
Well, you actually have your first question already, Don. From George
Yeah.
Lutch. He says, what do you think of the quality of the different filter manufacturers, meaning Optolong and Leah and so on?
Oh boy, is that a loaded question?
It is. No
Yeah, that's kind of a
softballs
loaded
tonight, man.
Yeah, that's kind of a loaded question, Don, because I was even thinking the same thing. Looking at the filters now and what got you into filter making,
Yep.
being in that very high Bordeaux sky. What is
Yep.
what did you see with those previous filter manufacturers that said, hey, with the product that is being sold now at that time made you decide, okay, I think I can do better? And what do you think of some of these current manufacturers that are out now, if you followed them?
Okay. Fair question. My background's technical. I have a doctorate, and I've used light to measure things all of my professional life. So when I fell into the astronomy hobby, filters and light and quantum efficiency of sensors, the sensitivity of our CCD and CMOS sensors, that's what I grew up with. And I remember way back in the 2000s, before global rentoscope was around and all of that, I rented some time with a guy named Ron Wadasky, who wrote an early book on astrophotography. Great guy, incredibly knowledgeable. I basically trained with him a little bit. And back then, there was SBIG, and there were filters made by Custom Scientific for SBIG. And we tried to take a picture of a galaxy, and we said, okay, to make this galaxy look right, we have to take 12 minutes of a blue exposure. We had to take 10 minutes of a green exposure and 17 minutes of a red exposure. And I'm going, well, that's kind of nuts, because we didn't like to scale dark. So we ended up taking a 12 and a 10 and a 17-minute dark, because you don't want to scale your darks generally. And I'm thinking, why do you have to do that? And so then I looked into it, and basically what I decided to do was design filters at that time for those type of cameras. Those are full frame CCD cameras, very red sensitive, not so blue sensitive. And the goal was to say, all right, I want you to take 10-minute exposures of red, green, and blue. That means you only have to take one dark time of 10 minutes. So take 5 of those or 10 of those and average them together. Let's solve the problem. There's no reason, to do all of this strange 12-minute, 14-minute, 8-minute things. And the last answer to your question is, back in the day, they used to make narrowband filters. The same company did, and they were a millimeter thicker than the LRGBs, which means, and back then, electronic focusers weren't exactly in vogue. You had to basically go out there and manually do it for a while until they got electronic focusers. So your narrowbands were thicker, and they barely reached 70% throughput. And I said, well, that's crazy. There's a way of doing this so that you use the same glass that we use for our RGBs, 3 millimeters thick, hard coated on both sides, and I can get that transmission up to 95% or 90% or something like that. And that way, and I knew I could do it consistently. It took 5 vendors to find one that could do it. But I put that guarantee on the box of every narrowband filter that I made, that this filter will give you H alpha or S2 or O3 or H beta, whatever. And I guarantee that that this filter is going to pass 9 out of every 10 photons to your detector. In other words, it has a throughput of 90% at the HA bandpass. And so I just decided back in the early days I was going to make things simple, 1 to 1 to 1 for RGB, The narrow bands were the same thickness as the RGB, so you didn't have to refocus, and you were guaranteed a free replacement if we didn't meet the 90% throughput, which is a huge advancement over the 70-some throughputs, 70-some percent throughputs that were kind of, the standard of the day. I'm not sure if I answered your question, Eric, but that's kind of what got me into it and why I developed my own. And then, I had them make some for me and my friends at the time who were really big into astrophotography said, hey, can you make some for us? And that's how the Astrodon business started.
Wow. And what do you think
of its simplicity?
What are your thoughts of now? What are your thoughts of filters today and filter manufacturers? Because that's what I think what George was asking. Do you have opinions? Have you tried any other types of filters, or do you have any opinions on the types of filters that are being released out today?
Plead the fifth.
Yeah, this gets into international politics.
Yeah. I don't know if we could answer that question safely.
There's some reproducibility issues. Answer in a positive sense. I think Chroma, from what I see online and what I've read about, makes a damn good filter. I know they're very expensive. People have mentioned that to me. But then again, to make a 3-nanometer narrowband filter that has 90% or more throughput at the emission wavelength, that isn't easy to do. And they've done it, if you believe what they have on their website. So though they would be a group I would trust. The others, I simply don't know enough. I know enough not to say anything.
Fair enough.
It's funny, Don. You know what?
Literally, I haven't tested them myself, so I don't know.
The feed actually went blank for about 10 seconds, just as Eric asked you that question. So
maybe it was a good thing.
They're making funny. They're making fun in the chat, saying that maybe China cut the feed on us. But let's see. Let's see. You got another question from Ray. It looks like. Have you considered providing test results for the filters when purchased?
Oh, you mean like graphs and scans?
Yeah. Yep.
I did that in the early days of Astrodon. So I remember printing out. Can people see me?
Yeah, you're good.
Oh, okay. Yeah, printing out these little graphs from Excel, and I folded them and I put them in the box. And over like 5 or 7 years, nobody asked me anything about the graph. And the other way around that is it doesn't matter what the graph shows, as long as you can say this filter is 5 or 3 nanometers, because that's what we did back then. And it reaches X% transmission at 656.3, which is hydrogen alpha nanometers in wavelength. As long as I can put that on the box and I say we meet this spec, then it's really, if the customer has access to a spectrophotometer, or a company that can analyze it, and they can come back and say, nope, it's an 80% filter, I'll replace it. We never replaced one filter in all those years based on anybody contending our spec. We made specs. We wouldn't ship it otherwise. I mean, when I receive filters from my coders, I also have Excel data sheets from them. I see every single spectra that goes out. And if it doesn't meet spec, I first call my supplier and say, why in the hell did you ship it to me? Because that's out of spec.
Good.
And then I say, okay, well, it's 93%. We're guaranteeing 90%. It works, ship it. And ship it right away. We wanted to basically ship everything that we took an order for within a couple of days. And I think that was another good thing to do. Just be as responsive to customers as you possibly can and answer their questions if they've got them.
Awesome.
Got another one.
So
too.
we put it right on the box.
You're getting a bunch of questions even before we get to the Photoshop, the presentation.
No problem.
But you got two questions. One from my buddy Dave out in Long Island. Have you ever used Spectrum thin films on Long Island?
I knew of them, but no, I never did.
Okay.
And I think one of the reasons why, and they do good work, but they did what Botter did at the time. They had pre-cut individual filters, like 50 millimeter diameter filters, and they were held in a device. And back in the day, and I don't know whether Spectrum thin films were like this, but I know Botter was, you could see an uncoated rim around the edge of the filter.
Okay.
Because they were held in like a canister.
Okay.
And you had to block that either in your filter wheel with some sort of mask or painted or something, because you can't let white light through a 3 nanometer narrowband filter, which is black everywhere except in the bandpass.
Yep.
So I think I didn't do anything more with them, because we found over the years that making a large plate and coring out 50 millimeter filters or cutting 50 millimeter square filters, where it was coated to the edge and we didn't have to worry about this stuff, was a better way to go. So that's what all Astrodon filters were. They're all cut from larger pieces of glass that were coated in the chamber all at the same time.
Eric, you want to take a couple of these questions coming up?
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. One that was coming across. Oh yeah, this is a good one. George was wondering, when can we expect to see a cloud filter?
Oh. Cloud filter.
Cloud filter?
Yes.
Well, I have one a little bit better than that. I had one a little bit better than that. If you have a reflector, so it's open at the front end, we're going to put little micro wiper blades on our filters. So you can,
that's a one
it's kind of like a cloud filter. Yeah, exactly. That's right.
It's awesome.
Thank God I didn't have to build those.
SD Holland had one before that. Yeah.
Yeah, he did. I was going to get to that one. Do you have any plans to start making near infrared filter sets again?
Oh, geez. The near infrared filter sets I made because there are a couple of nebula, Mafe 1 and Mafe 2, that didn't show up very well with our filters, but they're pretty bright in the near IR. And those two filter sets that I made for myself are about the only ones that were ever used. The near IR filters were not very popular. So no, we had no plans of coming back with them. No.
Gotcha. Norm here.
But if we were ever to come back, Eric, we would certainly come back with narrowbands. We'd come back with our photometric filters, which solved many problems back in the day as well.
Yep.
And we bring out a new set of LRGB filters that are kind of tuned to CMOS. If I decided to crawl out of the ground and become unburied and start up a business again at my age, which is not easy to do.
A lot of questions.
Yeah, a lot of questions here. One from Norm. So I think I have a set of first gen filters. They're very shiny on both sides. Can they be recoated with current coatings cheaper than maybe purchasing a new set?
No, the Generation 1 filters had some issues of reflections and things in halos around stars, which we totally redesigned the second generation, the last one, in about 2009 or so, solved all the problems of the Gen 1 set. All of the coatings for like the RGB are on one side, and an AR, these are hard-coated AR coatings on the other. So you could tell which side is which for the Gen 2s. The Gen 1s, they're so old, I can't really help you except to say you should really trade them in or get what you can get from them and move on to something else.
Okay. All right. Next question was, what was the process used to achieve consistent glass thickness in your filters? Were they spun?
Glass thickness?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. What was the process to achieve that? Because it was consistent, the consistent glass thickness.
Yeah. That was all done with the people who made our substrates and polished our substrates, and we had very, very tight, like 3 millimeters plus or minus 0.025 millimeters thickness for any piece. If it was outside of that range, we measured it. We simply wouldn't sell it. So that was all done with the coaters. So they ensured that the substrates were correct before they spent hours in a coating chamber. And that was kind of all done in one step for me, but for them, it's multiple processes.
Sure.
But the thickness tolerances were very, very tight, because when you start getting down to F3 and F3 type of telescopes, your critical focus distance goes way down to like less than 10 microns, and plus or minus 0.025, that's plus or minus 25 microns. Now, we did a lot better than that. The average was much better than that. But as you get down to F3, people who know with hyperstars and the new Celestron, the Rasas and all that. I mean, it doesn't take much to go out of focus. You're talking about microns of focusing distance. So you can only push your substrate supplier so far, where it's so difficult to make plus or minus 0.005 that nobody can afford your filters. So it's just a manufacturing trade-off as to what you can do, and can you sell it at a reasonable price where it doesn't impact people's images.
Well, we have one more question from Bob. And this is something that comes up a lot, and I know you do a lot of talking about the care of the filters and how to clean them properly. You just had a question. What process or product do you recommend for cleaning your filters?
I just put them in my jean pocket and put it in the washer and dryer, and
the tumble dry. Tumble dry. There you go.
I always used, and I have some here. I don't know if people can see this, but
Kimtech. Yep.
Kimtech, the Kim wipes.
Yeah.
Lay it on a clean surface, a surface that's been cleaned. Hey, I'll see yours and I'll raise you too. And then I would have an eyedropper of 90% isopropyl alcohol. You can buy that in your Safeway or your CVS or Walgreens. And I would put couple of drops there that would spread out to about 2 inches. And I would simply drag the filter through the wet area and lift it off. So there's no residual water or isopropanol. Then I'd flip it over, do the same thing. put it back in the envelope, the felt envelope that we generally use, seal it up, and put it in the box and ship it to the customer. And I did that for every filter that Astronaut ever made. So I personally cleaned every filter, and I knew that what went into the box was clean. But then there were some controversies near, in the late teens about dirty filters. And I still, to this day, I don't know how a clean filter that I personally packaged in a box could all of a sudden have all sorts of dust over it. It escaped me. So that's one of the mysteries of my life.
Yeah, well, some people need to stay away from glass items. That's all we got to say. So I guess I'm the only outlier that doesn't use Kimmy wipes. So Kim wipes. There you go. Peck pads. I use peck pads. Very similar to the Kim wipes. 100%, 99.99% pure, lint-free, no scratch, all that kind of stuff. But that's the biggest thing. One of the biggest things I see, especially with newbies and the cleaning of optics, that people don't know what they don't know until they know it. And they sit there and they clean things, and some people will just take any sort of like something they use for their eyeglasses or something like that. Now, not everything is perfect. You can't sit there and clean these filters with a microfiber. You don't want to do that. You want to sit there and have something that's very, very lint free. Nothing's going to get on your filter. And just like Don said, just drag it across, clean it nice, very little amount of liquid, and pop it into whatever case or filter wheel that you want to use.
Well, the drag wipe, as we call it, is important. And the key to that is we're not applying any pressure to that filter. It's riding on that liquid. And when you pull it off, it's immediately dry.
Yep.
Whereas if you take a microfiber, most people take a microfiber, clean the glass off like your glasses, put it in your pocket, which is filthy, and then use it again without washing it. We, for Kim wipes, you never use the same Kim wipe again. It gets tossed. And you don't want to apply any pressure, because even though the particles that are definitely going to be there are likely to be soft, if you put enough pressure on it, you're talking about film thicknesses that are, less than a couple of microns thick. You can scratch those coatings if you apply too much pressure and you have the wrong type of particle underneath. That's why this kind of lay it on it and just lightly pull it off works every time. And you don't take a chance of damaging your filter, even though these are hard oxide coatings, and they take a lot to scratch. They can be scratched.
Yeah, it's just, you want to take very good care of your filters. These are expensive pieces of glass that you use to get these awesome pictures that we see on all the pictures of the week, the month, the year, all the stuff that you guys and girls send into us. The last thing you want to do is have some sort of particle on there and just do, and then all of a sudden you got that nice little scratch right across the thing. And then what do you say? Then you try and send it back to Don and say that he did it, and he's going to be like, "What?"
That has happened. Everything has happened.
Oh yeah.
But you know what? If it's a hairline scratch, take a flat of that filter with that hairline scratch. You'll never see it. And it's very likely you will not see it in an image unless perhaps a bright star is sitting right on the scratch and there's some sort of optical reflection going on. But generally, a hairline scratch is not the death of a filter. A crack?
We've got a lot of people who are really hoping that you would who miss your product and hope that you would come back, to manufacture, products again, you yourself, and take because from what I'm hearing from you, Don, is that you took the time out to ensure quality there was real quality control, and you had a passion, and you wanted to make sure your customers were satisfied. And there's so many companies out there that don't necessarily do that nowadays. So personally, even though I don't own your filters, but I want to thank you for, being that type of company, having that type of company that would take the time out to do things like that. So really appreciate that.
And
Thank
Don,
you very much.
You got a hello. Apparently, Adam Block is in the chat room. Said hi. So
hey, Adam, how you doing?
Yeah,
that's great.
One question was, and I'm going to let everybody know, please, and correct me if I'm wrong, Don, or anything like that, that you are retired. You have right now no serious plans of starting back up your, Astrodon, for, you running Astrodon. Is that correct? Or have you thought about coming back?
I sold the business, as everybody knows. I sold the business to OSI, Optical Structures, in January, just about 5 years ago.
Yep.
Yeah.
This month. And I had to make a decision. I'm kind of selling my baby, and if they do great with it, that's fine. That's what we all hope. But if something happened, well, that's part of the risk. But I decided that was the time for me to get out. But I've watched people post their images. I've looked at the change in technology. I'm shocked by some things I see. I'm thinking, oh, CMOS cameras, one electron, for noise and everything. What do you mean you can't bin the thing? You can't bin 2x2.
What's
what
binning?
do you guys do? Yeah, and then I get from the newer people, well, what's that? So I guess
what's a bloom? What's a bloom? Nobody blooms anymore.
So my heart is there. I would like to start it up again, but I'm not sure my aged body can take what I had to do 10, 15 years ago. I'm a much older guy now.
well, if you ever do come back, AstroWorld will be happy to sell your filters for you. So
there you go. And what do you think? Being a filter manufacturer and maker, what do you think of some of these newer filters, especially when it comes to the multi-narrowband filters for the one-shot color cameras? Would you yourself ever have wanted to attempt that, to manufacture filters like that, if you were still in the business? And what do you think? And if you followed these filters now, what are your thoughts on these, especially with these new color cameras that are out nowadays?
Interesting question. Great question. My number one project, and this is in 2017, right before I sold the business in January of 2018, my number one project would have been a multi-narrowband filter. So personally, I'm very interested in it. I've seen different companies come out with different varieties. They lump the sulfur and hydrogen together, and then they lump the H beta and the oxygen together. So there's 2-band, 3-band, 4-band. I haven't done enough research to know, but my gut would tell me I'd go after the top thing. I'd come out with a 4-band filter if I was going to get into it again. Because I think there are a lot of one-shot color people out there.
Yes, there are.
Who would really benefit from a filter like that. That wasn't the Astrodon market when I was selling to 20-inch, 16-inch RC people. And they were all using basically the same camera, the 16803 or something like that, or a professional scientific back then camera. So it wasn't quite my market back then, but now the world's changed and I've tried to kind of keep up with it. That would still be of great interest to me.
That would be awesome because you know what, and we talked a little bit offline. If you were ever to come back into the, throw your hat back into the ring, I'm telling you, just from the chat comments there, you would definitely, that's 50 people there. Forget about that. That multiply that by I don't even know how many people would follow you back. I'm telling you, you're like Nike. You know what I mean? You're the Nike of filters, and it was the standard. It really was. And I'm not blowing smoke. I'm an Astrodon user. I used them for many, many years and had nothing but awesome. I had the E series for my KAF 8300, and it was awesome. It was great, and you would definitely be able to regarner your business, I'm sure.
Well, Sylvester Stallone came out with a couple of Rocky movies near the end where he's totally retired, much older, and he got into the ring with a younger guy. And that's what I'm wondering about with this. Do I want to be that older guy that gets into the ring?
And if you remember that movie, it was a draw. So you know what? Even if it's a draw, you still got it, man. That was the whole thing. You still got it.
Yeah, but it would hurt a lot for a long time.
I'm not saying you're not going to get any bruises, but but everyone's like, I'm in, come on back. Everyone in the chat, and Carol wants that 4-band filter. She wants that 4-band.
Yeah.
Well, to answer your question, my heart says yes, but my brain says, yeah, not a good idea.
I hear you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost 10 o'clock. Why don't you want to start the presentation that you had ready to go?
Yeah.
Or?
Sure.
All right. So why don't we start the presentation, and then we'll have more.
Is everybody awake out there?
Oh yeah, we got 50. We have 50 people still watching you right now. So I mean,
and they're all awake. Wow.
At least Mark, MX Quattro, and Carol and Mike Y is awake.
That's a quorum. That's a quorum. We should do.
Yeah, DIY NASA said, "Heck yeah!" So I guess everybody's awake. So everyone's.
You want me to share my screen now?
Yeah, you can share your screen. I'll make you on the big side here. So you're full screen.
Okay, let's see if I get it. And share.
There you go. Boom.
Okay. Are we ready?
We are ready.
We are ready.
Okay.
Hey, Don, before you start, I'm kind of curious about the icon in the bottom right-hand corner. Is that
what is that?
I love that icon.
It looks like a telescope on a
significance of that icon.
Yeah, that's my picture of the moon. That's a brontosaurus. At least it was called that when I put it in there. And then there's a young astronomer looking through a refractor and a tripod on the dinosaur's back. And that was my first emblem for Astrodon.
That's awesome.
Because in the way that I can't remember the scientific name for the dinosaur, I didn't know anybody was asked a question about it, but there was a dentist in the state of New Jersey who cut a dinosaur tooth in half, horizontally, not vertically, okay? And he saw a star pattern. And they named the dinosaur some sort of astro name. And so I thought, all right, Astro and Don, Astrodon, that is, believe it or not, if you check in Maryland, I believe, there is a state dinosaur. I mean, it's kind of an official thing. So I thought that might be a good icon for the beginning Astrodon business a long time ago.
There it is. So Astrodon was named
like Sagittarius, right?
So Astrodon was named in 1858, was the first sauropod discovered in North America.
Yeah.
Astrodon became the Maryland state dinosaur in 98.
Yes, state dinosaur of Maryland.
There you go.
I thought that was pretty cool. So it became you know, my emblem.
That's awesome.
So that's where Astrodon came from. So anyway, I still have a website. It has all of my astro images at astrodonimaging.com in the gallery. So you can go there if you're bored one night. And here's what I'm going to cover. I'll try and cover it a little bit more quickly since it's late, especially back where you guys are.
Don't worry about us.
What is deep sky astrophotography? You know, I do a lot of daytime photography, and people come up to me, say, "You want to see my astrophotograph?" And I'm thinking, "Oh, wow, you know, galaxy or nebula?" No, it's a Milky Way shot. To most people walking around, Milky Way is astrophotography, and we do something quite different. How do we relate to astronomy as human beings? Are the colors that we see in our finished photographs real? And how do what we do is different than what people are doing with DSLRs and mirrorless cameras? Light. A quick summary. So I've given this talk in a bunch of camera clubs, and I have to be very careful, like I just mentioned, as to what we're doing, what we're not doing. We're not doing solar imaging, we're not doing nightscapes and Milky Way shots, and we're not doing planets. In other words, nothing solar system-ish. We are doing deep sky objects, galaxies, star clusters, emission nebula, planetary nebula, and supernova remnants. By the way, that's a 6-panel mosaic taken with a Takahashi 130, TOA 130 scope from Siding Spring. And that's the Vela supernova remnant. Amazing structure.
That's awesome.
And that's about 5 by 7 degrees in terms of the field there, I believe. Yeah, about 5 by 8 degrees. Okay, so a lot of what I like to image really are talking about the end of life of a star. For stars that are much larger than ours, than our sun, greater than 8 times the solar masses here, they don't end so well. They end up in supernovas. Not too many of them compared to the other way of death, but maybe 5% is what I could come up with. But they leave traces that we can image, like the Crab Nebula, M1. But most of the stars aren't that big. They're more like ours. For the smaller stars like ours, most of them end up as planetary nebula. So they expel their outer layers. The inner star, the star that's left, becomes very hot, a white dwarf. It irradiates the puffed out layers, excites them, and turns them into a planetary nebula that we can image. Those were my favorite targets to image over all of the years that I image. I'd throw a galaxy in here and there, but my joy was to image planetary nebula. A couple of quotes for you to consider, because sometimes in technical hobbies like astrophotography, you get so involved in the how-tos and what do I do, how do I do it, that you kind of lose track of what we're doing, of what we're trying to accomplish. In other words, what are we taking a picture of as human beings? What are we trying to show other people? What's the meaning of that picture? So this is a quote from Arthur. 2 possibilities exist. Either we're alone in the universe or we are not. And I love this. Both are equally terrifying.
Yep.
Yeah. And here's a quote from some guy. Astronomy challenges the mind with vast distances and huge times, and they're outside our realm of experience. We have no common frame of reference to think about something that's 61 million light years away. I mean, how do you explain that to the average person? That's what you're taking a picture of. But what does that mean? You know, when did that light leave that object? So I want to spend a little time putting some of that in perspective. I hope this is not too simplified for the people watching this, because, you know, you're all astrophotographers and we all have delved into the science and the technology of doing what we do. But I just wanted to put kind of an overlayer on this and try to explain what we're doing and what we're a part of. So what do I mean vast distances? Well, the number one most popular target to photograph in the sky is the Great Orion Nebula, M42. It happens to be the most difficult object to process and to get a good image of. It took me 15 years. This is a 2019 image that I took with my observatory partner, Joseph Durdes. And it's the best one that I've ever done, but it took me about 15 years to get there. But, you know, when you look at that, it's only, people say it's only 1,350 light years away. Only 1,350 light years away. What does that mean? Well, Chicago's only 500 miles from where I'm at right now. Okay, I think I can put that into perspective, but what does 1,350 light years mean? So we got to talk about vast differences, vast distances. So what's a light year? Distance that light travels in 1 Earth year. Speed of light is 186,000 miles per second. So that equates out to about 6 trillion miles in 1 light year, but using a light year is a whole lot easier to say, and you don't have all the commas and the digits to deal with. So we talk in light years. Let's put that into perspective. This is my picture of our solar system, taken with a CD. No, never mind. This is a schematic of our solar system. Here we are, tucked in nice and close. And we're going to talk about our recently named dwarf planet Pluto. I don't know where everybody stands on that, but my grandkids were very unhappy about the demotion. They just want Pluto. Anyway, the average distance of Pluto is about 3.25 billion miles away. Sorry for the comma there, except for people in Europe who use commas for what we use as decimal points, but it's 3.25 billion miles away. It takes light 4.8 hours to reach Pluto from the sun. You know, it takes what, 8 minutes to reach us? But when you do the math, Pluto is less than 1/1000th of a light year away. That's just mind-boggling to me, because to put that in perspective, let's talk about NASA's New Horizons space probe that flew by Pluto and took amazing pictures that the quality of which we've never seen before. And it took 9 years for that probe to reach Pluto, with gravity assists from Jupiter and Saturn, getting it up to a speed of 36,000 miles an hour. An hour, not a second, but an hour. And it took 9 years to get there. Okay, so let's take that to the next level. Our nearest star is Proxima Centauri. It's only 4.2 light years away. But if you do the math on what I showed you in the previous 2 slides, and if the New Horizons probe was pointed to Proxima Centauri after it passed Pluto, it would get there in another 60,000 years. And that's the closest star to our sun. And to put that time in perspective, you know, the first humans populated the Americas only 13 to 15,000 years ago. So it's going to take an inordinate amount of time just to reach the closest star to our sun. So, This is an artist's schematic of what scientists think the Milky Way looks like as a barred spiral. We're about halfway from the center of the core to the edge. We're here in this little bubble. It's about 100,000 light years across. Remember, Proxima Centauri is 2.5 light years. It's even the Eagle Nebula and the Great Orion Nebula are all in this little blue bubble here.
Wow.
All in our neighborhood. And you got 100 billion stars. I've seen estimates as high as 200 billion stars for the Milky Way. It's us into galaxy land. All right, so we're here. And let's say this is a southern barred spiral galaxy, NGC 1365, the southern gem. It's 60 to 65 million light years away. And I think I tried to do the calculation on this just based on the numbers you saw before. And I think I came up with 20 billion years to get that probe to NGC 1365, which is a neat trick because we think we know that the universe and the Big Bang happened 14.5 billion years ago, right? So how do you work that in? How do you get your mind wrapped around that? So that tells you the distances are just enormous. We're all alone. I mean, we're really all alone in space. This is another southern gem, another barred spiral, NGC 1300. It's 61 million light years away. So light that we see today left NGC 1300 about the time the dinosaurs went extinct, which is amazing. So if it blew up or merged with another galaxy and got all distorted 10,000 years ago, we wouldn't know about it in our lifetime or our great-great-great-great-grandchildren's lifetime. Take millions of years for us to see that event. So astronomy is a time machine. We get to look back in time, which is exactly what the James Webb telescope is trying to do for us, looking in the near infrared and the infrared. It's looking back in time, further than what the Hubble could do. Okay, this is another one that's near and dear to my heart. Attending many star parties, after looking at many beautiful astrophotographs, no color. Most of the galaxies and nebula that you see, except the brightest ones like Orion, they're kind of a gray patch in your telescope. So we don't see objects in full color when we're looking through even large telescopes because the signals are simply too faint to activate the color sensors, which are the cone receptors in our retinas. We need to amplify the signal with our CCD. See, this talk is a little dated. CCD cameras in computers. There were CCD cameras, especially the type that the researchers used, the back-thin cameras, detectors, that had a quantum efficiency, a sensitivity, conversion of photons into electrical signal of 90%. That's pretty good because our eyes are somewhere between 2 and 4% efficient in terms of turning photons into a signal that our brains can understand. So, maybe 40, 50 times more sensitive than our eye, the cameras. And then we have the computers that can stretch out the data. And the resulting color is what we would see if the object really was bright enough to activate our color sensors in our eyes. But the color is real. We have some guidelines to follow to do it, but the color is real. Okay, a little talk about equipment. Won't spend much time on it, but this is what I imaged with in Siding Spring, Australia. We are just down the hill from the Anglo-Australian telescope. This is the itelescope.net facility. You can see the roll-off roof is very big, rolls off here, and they must have 20-some piers in there for all of their customers, and I was one of them. And I had for years there a CDK 20 scope, 20-inch scope. This was a rotator focuser. There was a filter wheel. There was an off-axis guider used to help guiding. And that was, I believe at the time, it was an Apogee U16M. It was a 16803 full frame CCD. And on top of it, I had a Takahashi TOA 130. At that time, they made something called a super reducer, which is incredibly expensive. But I got it and attached another 16803 and filter wheel to that system with an off-axis guider. And I think the focal length of that system was 760 millimeters, and the focal length of the CDK at f5.8, I believe, was about 3,500 millimeters. So I could go from high res to wide field, on the next night if I wanted to. But we always talked about aperture envy. And so here I was with the most expensive telescope I thought I would never buy, but I did, thanks to Astrodon. And it was, it's a 0.5 meter telescope, but the Hubble put up in space without our seeing problems was about 5 times as big. And you know that the James Webb is much bigger than that. So, but that's what I could afford at the time. And it was placed way out in the middle of nowhere near Coonabarabran in southeast Australia, north of Melbourne and south of the Gold Coast, southwest of the Gold Coast. So that's where my telescope was, and I never saw it. I never traveled there to see it, but it sure did a good job for me. And this is probably too simple for this group, but just a basic schematic of what's going on. Lights entering the reflector from the front, coming back, hitting the primary mirror that had its cord out in the middle, reflected back up to a secondary, which is focused at some point back here near where the CCD sensor is in the cooled imaging camera. It's generally a camera and focuser or rotator here, so that moves the optical train to the point where you can get perfect focus on your detector. And then, as we'll talk about in a minute, the larger telescopes generally had a rotator that could rotate the whole camera package so that you could put a guide star in the guide scope, because there's your guiding camera. It's generally a pick-off prism right here, sending light up to a CCD camera. That's sitting on, that's helping the mount to stay on one star all night long. And then if you have a monochrome camera, you have a filter wheel that puts your red, green, and blue filters between the telescope and your camera so that you can get color results. And just a simple schematic there. I think this is a Paramount ME back in the day, German equatorial mount, where the RA axis, center of the RA axis, is pointing to true north. And there are a variety of means to do your polar alignment and get that as perfect as you can get it. And the RA axis, right ascension axis, is motorized, and it's moving at the sidereal rate, the rate the stars move across the sky. And then you have a secondary axis here, the declination or deck axis. It rotates 90 degrees from the RA. So between the two of those, you can point to anywhere in the sky. And with the counter shaft here, you can put enough weights on here, as shown here, to pretty well counterbalance almost anything. You could release the brake here, and you could use your little finger and rotate this whole 175-pound package so that it's horizontal, for example. So we all have to use motorized mounts in some way or another, and we all have to guide. Now this is, I probably could come up with a better slide, but this is kind of all we got. The mount will take you only so far, but if you're at a big focal length, you're going to need some help in guiding to keep one star on one pixel all night long. And that's pretty much what the guide camera does. So let's say it'd be sitting here and it would keep this star on the pixel below it all night long by sending signals to the mount and making corrections. But because the sensors are not perfect and there are places where there are imperfections, maybe some dropouts, maybe some other issues that are nonlinear, we all do dithering, or we did do dithering, so that we would move that star over several arc seconds to another place, and then we would continue to guide on that star, and all of those images would not superimpose on those. We would use software later to superimpose them. So we would dither our images to reduce some of these background noise issues when we recombined all of our sub-exposures in post-processing. Now, this is a real old slide, so I apologize for it, but I'm trying to compare what people are used to for daytime photography and for Milky Way photography to what we use on the back of our scopes. So you can use a DSLR or a mirrorless camera. Generally, there's a megapixel race, so they try and put as many megapixels in these cameras as possible, like 20 to 50. I've got a Sony A7R Mark IV that has 61 megapixels in it. But when you cram that many filters into a full frame area, 24 by 36 area, pixels are going to get smaller, and smaller pixels don't do as well with low light signals. It's an uncooled camera. Almost all of them are colored. They use a Bayer matrix over all the pixels. So you have this pattern of four filters repeated here and here and here all around, so that your H alpha signal is picked up here and would be picked up with another red filter there, and this would be interpolated between the two. So small pixels, not cooled, and a Bayer matrix. And we compare that to what we use, some sort of Astro camera. You can't look through it. It's cooled. Here are the cooling fans. It's designed to screw onto the back of your scope and hopefully get you close to your focus point with a little bit of help from the focuser. Fewer pixels, like the 16803s, I think had 16 megapixels. They were 9 microns big. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but large pixels.
It's big.
Monochrome. Yeah, monochrome. Actually, there are some DSLRs and mirrorless cameras. The Nikon D750 has like 7 or 8 micron pixels. And it was designed for police, for low light situations. So there are some cameras out there that have some larger pixels. The old Canon 6D was another one of them. So there are cameras out there that aren't on this megapixel race that could do some good jobs for you. Anyway, we're generally cooled 25 to 40 degrees C below ambient. And because these are monochrome cameras, we're trying to get the highest resolution. Every pixel counts. We're not having to deal with a red pixel here and then another one over here and another one over there. But to get that, we have to use something that's near and dear to my heart, filters and filter wheels, electronically controlled. So that filter wheel would fit on top of here. It would connect into the focuser rotator, which is on the back of the scope, and away you go. Okay, we could spend a lot of time on this page because I'm going to show you some graphs and show you some pictures. So if anybody in the chat has a question, please let the moderators know, and I'll try and answer it. These are the spectral graphs of the Astrodon Gen 2 E series. So these were made for the 1603, the 8300, the full frame type of cameras of the day, not the old inner line cameras like the STL 11000 that you might have read about in the are seen in the museums. I don't know if they make them anymore. But anyway, so what we're doing here is plotting the transmission of light through the filter. So let's say the blue filter here at 375 nanometers, it's not going to let any light through. But when you get up to 425 nanometers, right about here, it's going to let about 9.5 photons out of 10 on the average through to the detector. This is what we're trying to do. We're trying to give you the most transmission where it counts and where it's supposed to be. Okay, so we have a blue filter, and it will look deep blue to you. We have a green filter here, and then we have a red filter. And this is kind of this red filter kind of looks like what a can of Coca-Cola looks like. It's a deep red filter. Many of the filters that you're using in your RGB filters are more orange-like. So they're much wider here than I'm showing with these E-series filters. And that's what I'm seeing with a lot of the filter sets out there right now. But I wanted to balance this so that if you combine the data from a full frame sensor using these filters, they were designed to give you what's called a G2V, a sun-like star white balance. In other words, a sun-like star is going to look white in your image. So when you do all the math and you do all the combinations and you put it on your camera, which is a full frame CCD camera of the day, you should be able to combine that close to with color weights of 1 to 1 to 1. They might vary 10%, but that's kind of in the noise, and that allows you to take the same, as I said earlier before the talk started, that would allow you, if you're taking 10-minute subs here, to take 10-minute darks without having to stretch your darks to equal 15-minute exposures. So that was kind of the goal there. But these had the broadband filters, the red, the green, and the blue, had one mission in life, and that's to give you correct, quote, correct star colors, broadband light sources. It should give you pretty good galaxy colors for the same reason, okay? Forgetting about the H2 regions and some of the other peculiarities in galaxies. But so these are designed to give you broadband star colors, stars and galaxies. They were not designed to bring out all the incredible detail you see in my M42 here. You're going to get those from narrowband images, narrowband filters, and that's what they look like. Okay, so this might be 60 to 70 nanometers wide. We call that the bandwidth or the full width half max. That's measured 50% of the max, which is almost 100 there, is at 50. So the difference in nanometers between here and here is about 60. Your orange filters are more like 100, okay? The narrow bands are down there in the 6, 5, 4, 3 nanometer range, and they're shown here. So this is the oxygen 3. This is the hydrogen alpha. This is the sulfur. These are real scans of Astrodon filters. So even though we printed greater than 90% throughput at the emission wavelength on the box as our guarantee, we were really making 98% throughput filters. We just had to give ourselves some breathing room. But we would never sell a filter below 90%. Yeah, and when I started in Astrodon, the best you can get out of these 3 nanometer filters, I think there was one supplier at the time, you're getting somewhere in this range right here, about 65 to 70. So that was a big goal of mine. Okay, so what's going on with these broadband versus narrowband filters? You know, how am I getting my H alpha signal in my red filter? Well, you can see that the H alpha and the sulfur are completely contained within the red filter. So if you have any H2 emission, your red filter is going to pick it up. Okay, so that's kind of a no-brainer. See, the problem with astrophotography, unlike daytime photography, is you've got a mix of broadband emitters like stars and galaxies, which are made of stars, but you also have narrowband data coming in at the same time. Well, you're going to get your star colors with short exposures from your RGB filters. Then you're going to probably take longer exposures with your narrowband filters, and you're going to use the greater contrast of your H alpha filter to get these red regions, and you're going to use the greater contrast of your oxygen filter to get some of these bluer regions out here. So we get a mixed bag of broadband and narrowband, and you have to design your filters to take advantage of that and avoid the pitfalls. And I'm just going to take a couple of minutes and explain the big problem is with the O3. When I first started out, I mentioned I tried 2 different brands of filters, and the dumbbell nebula M27, and one turned out very blue and one turned out very green. Actually, that's what happened. And it's all because of this. So when you design your filter, the blue filter has to come up far enough to capture all of the O3 band right here. So it has to come up a little bit beyond about 500 or 501 nanometers, and that's exactly what you see here. The O3 band is right here at about 98%. So the O3 band, the blue filter picks up all of the O3, and I didn't put it on this graph, but at 486 nanometers right here, at about 1/3 the signal of your HA, that's your H beta. Nobody uses it. Hardly anybody uses it. I never came out with it, because all I had to do is take my H alpha and multiply it by 0.3 and then color it blue, and that's what the H beta would be. So it is a blue emission sitting right about here. The blue is taking that in as well as the O3, okay? So the blue filter is very constrained in what it can do. Right here at this edge, this is ultraviolet light here. 400 nanometers is kind of where you start to get fattened stars in your refractors. So you can't go very far in here. You have to kind of keep it at 400 or above, or your stars start looking a little bit wonky in the blue. And you can't go, you have to go beyond the O3 filter here with your blue to capture it, but you don't want to intrude in green territory here. So you can't go very far this way with your blue filter, so you're kind of constrained. Similarly, because O3 is a teal color, it's a blue-green, almost equal blue-green color, that means the green has to carry the O3 the same way the blue does. So you see that the green has to avoid the H beta peak, which is right here. So it has to start right about there, and it has to come up very sharply and capture that O3, which is right here. I don't know if you can see my cursor.
Yep.
And then come over. And if you do this right, you get 2 very strong color filters, 99% throughput, both of which capture this 98% O3 at about 98%. It lets all the O3 in equally in the green filter and the blue filter. So if you have 1-to-1-to-1 color weights and your O3 is split evenly between your green and blue, you'll end up with the right teal color for O3, and your nebula will look normal. And so you have design constraints. Even in the CMOS world, you're going to have to do something like this. And that's something I'm kind of looking at as time permits as to what I would need to do for CMOS. And with the green filter, you can only go so far, because right here is all the sodium light pollution, the yellow light pollution that you have from your street lamps and from your cars. And anybody who's ever used an LPS filter, a light pollution suppression filter, and held it up to your yellow street lamp, you'll see a huge change, because it's designed to cut out that particular light pollution. So the green can't encroach very far to about 580 where all the yellow light pollution is. That's why we have a gap here. So in a way, we're doing a little bit of LPS in these RGB filters. And then the red filter, you can design pretty much any way you want as long as it contains the sulfur and the hydrogen alpha. So I went a little bit longer on this, but I wanted to emphasize that astrophotography is different in that we get a mix of broadband and narrowband emissions, and that impacts the way we design our RGB filters if you want them balanced to help you with the O3 problem when you're collecting narrowband data.
Okay. Don, I got a question to ask you before you go much further.
Yeah.
What about an N2 filter? Because didn't you used to make an N2 filter? Because that's at what, 658 nanometers? And it's pretty close to the H2.
Yeah, you need a 3 nanometer filter to separate about a 70% level the H alpha from the nitrogen. The nitrogen has 2 strong peaks on either side of this hydrogen peak, really, really close. And so if you look so basically what astronomers do is if their filters are like 5 nanometers, you'll see in their technical papers, HA plus bracket N2 bracket.
Mm-hmm.
And that means that, yeah, I'm trying to get H alpha signal, but there's a lot of nitrogen that comes with it. It's almost the same color as HA.
So
and it has 2 peaks right around it. Yeah.
What celestial targets then would be very good for N2? Would be like looking at planetaries?
Generally, yes. There are some exceptions, but there are some planetary nebula that have very little hydrogen alpha or hydrogen, and they're lit up because of the nitrogen. So what I learned from the business world side of the fence is that, yeah, we came out with nitrogen filters and hydrogen filters that are 3 nanometers. Forget it at 5. You're going to get nitrogen plus hydrogen at 5 nanometers, but at 3 nanometers, you can separate them about 70%. Mm-hmm. And over the years, I sold very few nitrogen filters because it for a couple of reasons. One, most of the time there's H alpha with the nitrogen. There are very few objects that are just nitrogen. And number 2, from a business standpoint, if you have a 5 nanometer H alpha filter, you're going to pick up both the hydrogen and the nitrogen. So why buy an extra filter? And you know how expensive they are, especially if you're talking about a 16803 and a 50 millimeter square 3 nanometer narrowband. So the business kind of forced me over the years to say, yeah, I've got a whole bunch of these sitting in inventory and nobody wants it. Just image with a 5 nanometer filter and you get both. As a matter of fact, toward the latter part of my era, before I sold my equipment, I was using 5 nanometer hydrogen and 3 nanometer oxygen. I recommend that everybody uses a 3 nanometer oxygen because, again, sunlight is reflected moonlight and it peaks at the hydrogen alpha wavelength. And I think everybody has seen stronger gradients with their O3 filter than they have with their sulfur or their hydrogen filters. Well, that's the reason why. So you can get away with a wider hydrogen alpha filter that also captures the nitrogen, and you don't have to worry about it. I'm not sure I answered your question.
No, you did answer it, and this is kind of why I wanted you to kind of present that with the nitrogen. But then also, Don, if you don't mind, talk about with fast vocal ratios about the 3 nanometers and the potential for blue band shift.
Okay. Yeah, these filters realize they're. Go ahead, please.
I was going to say, is that a slide that coming up in the future?
No.
Okay.
All I can tell you is that these are 3 nanometers wide. They're 90-some% throughput at the emission wavelength. And when you have a fast telescope like a RASA, which is what, F2, F2.2, something like that, right? Or an
Yes,
Epsilon
F2.
180, or an Epsilon 180 at F3. Well, calculations that I've done over the years and tests that I've done, so you can use these 3 nanometer narrowband filters down to about F3.5 or somewhere in that range and not lose too much. You're going to lose a little bit compared to F4.5 and F5. But when you get down to F3 and F2, as you know, the current narrowband companies have come out with shifted filters for fast telescopes. As the light gets away from hitting the detector at 90 degrees off axis, which your fast telescopes do, the nature of the narrowband filter shifts it towards lower wavelengths. So instead of the 501 O3 narrowband filter sitting at 501, it might shift down to 499 or 498. So the throughput at 501 would drop from 95% to maybe 60%, which isn't very good. So that's why your current companies have come out with pre-shifted filters. It's not just, but I just want to say, it's not just how fast your scope is. And I did some research with somebody at Lockheed a while ago. You have to not only look at how the filter bandpass shifts with angle. That's what a lot of people have done. They said, okay, well, it's an F3 telescope. That's 9 degrees off axis. 9 degrees off axis means you shift the band down 1.5 nanometers. That's not the whole story, because what you have to do is look at the histogram of the telescope, the refractor, or the reflector, and realize, like in a reflector, you generally don't have any rays of light coming straight down the barrel. And in a refractor, you don't have, you have a whole variety of angles there. So there's kind of a histogram at how many angles are coming in at 9 degrees, how many photons are coming in at 7 degrees, 6 degrees, how many photons are coming right down the barrel in a refractor, okay? You have to combine that with the natural shift of the bandpass of the filter and do what they call convolute. So you multiply and add, and that's how you find out what you can do theoretically with that filter and that telescope system in terms of getting you a good signal. So it's a complicated story, but the bottom line is that it's probably best to buy the pre-shifted filters if you have something like a RASA. It's expensive, but you're probably not going to get good performance out of your standard 3 nanometer filters built for F8 to F10.
Yep.
Long-winded answer. Sorry, Pete.
Oh, no, but this is what's so good, because I know that the viewer membership is really interested in this, because what I was going to ask you right here is, let's say we've got an F3.0. Would you recommend that we could go with the 3 nanometers, or would you recommend we go with a wider transmission bandpass, maybe going to the 5 nanometers? And would it be specific for all 3 filters for narrowband, or would you say maybe going with a wider bandpass for O3 S2, but I could maybe stay with a 3 nanometer at 3 nanometer for an F3.0 scope? What would be your recommendation?
An F3 scope is definitely going to cause you sensitivity loss. I mean, your throughput is not going to be 95% anymore. It's probably going to be like 70%. You're still going to get a signal. Mm-hmm. I have images from a guy named Gary of the Pac-Man Nebula taken on, I believe, an Epsilon 180 with a 3 nanometer filter. And you saw a lot of nebulosity and you saw small stars. So you're going to get a signal. Maybe your filter is only 65% throughput rather than 95. The question is, you'll have to image more subs. But do you want to spend the money to have both a kind of a long focal length, an f8 set of filters and an f3 set of filters, or you want to try and get by with one? And I go back to what I mentioned earlier. I think it's really important to get a narrow O3 filter, because most of us still want to do narrow band work when the moon's up, not right 5 degrees away from our target, but maybe 45, 50, 60 degrees away. And your hydrogen alpha and your sulfur are probably going to be fine at 3 nanometers, but your oxygen, if you go up to 5, you're going to start to see gradients. It's a progression. It's not an absolute fall off the cliff thing. So I've always recommended 3 nanometers, narrow for the O3. Kind of do what you want for the sulfur and the hydrogen. And again, the hydrogen has that nitrogen issue. So I'm feeling more comfortable with a 5 nanometer filter, unless you live in skies like mine, or some of you guys on the East Coast, where you really have to go 3 nanometers for everything. So it depends.
Oh, yeah.
It depends.
So really, basically, then, Don, is you brought up a couple of good points, but when we're looking at the difference of the transmission bandpass between, say, 3, 5, and 8 nanometers, literally the smaller the number, the better the color contrast is what we're really getting then. And the fact
I'm going to show you that in about 2 slides. Sorry, Pete. Okay. I'll show you that in 2 slides. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, no, that'll answer the question when we get it, because you've answered all the questions that I've got right here. Thanks, Don.
Okay. And 2 things to compare here. I'm going to show you a similar slide next, but this is M42, and this I did a lot of tri-couple palette narrowband imaging for a long time, and I loved it. But I started to kind of like this more natural color. And so this is where we map hydrogen alpha to red, O3 to pretty equal green and blue, just to get more of a natural color, but take advantage of the contrast that the narrowband filters give you. Because as you indicated, Pete, the 3 versus 5 versus 8 is all about contrast improvement. That's what narrowband filters are all about. So let me show you that. So that one was a natural color image, and this is just a tricolor narrowband, the Hubble color palette. People have called it different things, the wavelength ordered palette, long wavelength, intermediate wavelength, lower wavelength, mapped to red, green, and blue with the emissions there. And people call that false color. That's where the oxygen comes out very blue, and generally where your hydrogen alpha is, where your sulfur is. And so you mix the red and the green, and you get some sort of orange color. And I like that, but I tended to go towards the more natural color as I got older. Okay. And that's exactly what the people at the University of Arizona did when the most famous astrophotograph was published, The Pillars of Creation. They're only 7,000 light years away, by the way, just a hop, skip, and a jump. But they're produced the same way we produce ours, like that. Same thing, except they had a little bit bigger budget. Okay, this addresses your question about contrast. Okay, so what I thought of doing very early in the game, I had a 12.5-inch RCOS RC. I took 3 5-minute exposures. Had an SBIG STL 11000 CCD. What's that? CCD camera on a BISC Paramount ME. Okay, so this is all done on the same night, as quick as I could, trying to keep this technically as correct as possible. And this is the Crescent Nebula. And this is actually taken with a photometric red filter, which is really very similar to the orange RGB filters that you are probably used to. But this is an orange filter. It's a wide red. It's about like 110 nanometer wide compared to our 6 nanometer narrowband. All right, what happens to the contrast if you start using a narrow red like we used in the Astrodon E series? That's about a 60 nanometer wide red filter. So it looks red when you look through it. And all of a sudden, instead of being kind of an open structure here for the crescent, it begins to fill in and you begin to see more nebulosity form here. But the key is you're beginning to see the contrast advantages of going narrower with your bandpass filter. It's beginning to exclude more extraneous light, and it's beginning to bring out the structure that you want, which is red. Okay, now let's get into narrowband land. When I got into astrophotography, Chet Schuler had a business, and this is a Schuler 9 nanometer H alpha filter. And now you're beginning to see structure in the background. You see this here, and you see some fine structure there. Now, this is beginning to look like the pit of a prune or a fruit. It's beginning to fill in. It's looking solid. Compare that to the orange filter back here. It's a world of difference, and we really haven't jumped into modern H alpha ranges. Now we go to 6 nanometers, and now you can see that the background nebulosity is beginning to come out. This thing is much more distinct, and this is much more filled in. Now you're into a true narrowband range, which I think we range now from 7 down to 5 down to 3. That's a true narrowband. And now you're getting that contrast even in the faint nebulosity in the background, which is what we're after. Yeah, the Orion Nebula is incredibly bright near the trapezium, but when you start going way on the outskirts of it, some of that nebulosity is very faint. That's where these narrower filters come in. They give you the contrast to pull those signals out of the background. And this is a 4 nanometer. And you see the progression there from orange to a fairly tight H alpha filter, a true narrowband filter. Are there any questions on that?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Just talking back and forth in the chat pretty much.
Okay. Anyway, I thought this slide is very important to point out. That's what narrowband filters are in the business of contrast improvement. That's what they do. And they're also eliminating much of your light pollution, which allows you to take images of like the Veil Nebula with O3 and HA from your light polluted backyard in my Sacramento backyard. So it extends the time that we can use our expensive equipment. It's a shame that we have to think about putting away our equipment for 2 weeks every month. But with the narrowband filters, you've widened that usability range. Okay, and as I mentioned, just like you have white points in your Canon and Nikon cameras, we have one too. It's called a sunlight star. Our classification is a G2V star, and your various planetarium programs will show you where they exist. So you can go to that star and take 3 exposures, the same length, like 1 minute, whatever. It just makes sure you don't saturate the signal, make sure it's undersaturated. And from that, you can calculate what your color weights are. Like, I think my weights ended up being 1.1 for blue, 1 for green, and 1.05 for red using a 16803 CCD. But I did that and I designed the filters to make sure that that sunlight star is white. Now you have really complex procedures. I think Pixinsight just came out with a new one. Other programs do the same, where they can get you a pretty accurate means of getting weights for your RGB filters, or corrections if you have a one-shot color camera, how to correct whatever color that comes out with, to make sure that you end up with a G2V type of reference. But that's what we did when I was heavily involved in astrophotography. And we all have some type of planetarium software. So we know where things are in the sky, when they're going to be up, and how long we're going to have to image them that night, and whether we have to go through a meridian flip. If you have a German equatorial, you have to have the right equipment to do that. But our planetarium programs pretty much show you where they are and when they're going to be there. And then this is, I think, the Sky X. So we know which end is up, so to speak. North is up, east is to the left. This is my system. It's a CDK20, a 16803 sensor, all put together to give me, this is my field of view. Okay, so that's about 35 arc minutes by 35 arc minutes, a square sensor. Wow, can you think of that, you CMOS people? That's one. Anyway, so a square sensor it has its problems, because sometimes you don't know when you put your hardware together which side is up, and different manufacturers made up in different directions. So I had a little tricks to find out, put light leaks in there to know that the detector, the guide detector is up off here, because I had a little light leak let in my camera system, and I knew it came in from this direction where my off-axis guider was. So you get here's your field of view, so you can center your object, and then you can rotate your camera package so that it gets that guide star in the guide camera, which is a fairly small detector, and away you go. And you could be imaging all night with that. You can do a meridian flip, so it rotates back 180 degrees and finds that star. These are generally with longer focal length systems. With your refractors, I know you have piggyback guiders, and you just do you just keep going. And if you have to do a meridian flip, you just take another image there with your off-axis guider or your piggyback guider, and away you go. But this is the way I had to do it when I had an off-axis guider on a CDK20 at 3,500 millimeters of focal length.
Hey,
So,
Don, just out of curiosity, what OAG did you have on the plane wave? Was that the Optec? Was it the Sagitta?
no, it was an Astrodon Monster Mode.
Oh, it was the
There you
Monster Mode.
go.
That's right. Yeah.
That was one of the other things that I developed early in the game. You know, after I got the filters and bought the filter wheels and everything, I found that I had a C11, and I found that the image was kind of moving across the screen in progressive subs. And I couldn't understand that. And then I learned all about mirror flop and locking mirrors down and finding people who are drilling into the back of their scopes and all that. They fixed a lot of those problems over the years. But anyway, that's that's what I had to deal with back then. So I designed the Monster Mode so I would just couple right in with the system, add minimal back focus, and I wouldn't have to guide with the internal guider. Boy, that caused a lot of arguments with SBIG at the time. But they had their guider in back of the filters, especially H-alpha filters, and that was really tough to do. And I said, why do that? Let's put the guider in front and use a pickoff prism, and that's how the Astrodon Monster Mode got born. And we actually sold a lot of those. It turned out to be not a bad idea.
I just
Don,
sold. I literally just sold 2.
Monster Mode 2, remember? You had the capability of having 4 ports.
Yep.
Oh yeah, that came later when I was bored. I said, what else can I do with this? And yeah, put in 4. And that came from a request from Europe, where they somehow were putting multiple cameras on it. And I don't know how they did the switching, but I designed that for them. It was a real easy mechanical change. Even I could do that in AutoCAD, but and I'm not very good in AutoCAD or those type of programs, but that's what we did. And I'm not sure many people used it, but we did it because we could do it.
Yeah.
Okay. Almost near the end here. The difference between what we do and DSLR and Milky Way type of shots, we use telescopes. So essentially, we're a prime lens. We're a fixed aperture. We can't really change anything without a lot of ripping things out and putting things back together, as opposed to using a zoom lens on a tracker on a tripod. Our mounts are motorized, they're not tripods. We can point anywhere in the sky with them and they move at the sidereal rate. The camera is typically cooled, typically monochrome, with as large of a pixels as you can find to make it a good low light camera. The light, as I tried to indicate in talking about those spectral graphs, many objects mix broadband and narrowband. They come with the territory when you do deep sky astrophotography, and the filters have to take that into account. So we have both broadband and narrowband filters. Talked about the white point. I always use the G2V star measurement, but there are other ways to do it. And use the weights to combine the RGBs. Generally, what I did is I took something like 6 5-minute exposures, even for some of those 40-hour exposure shots, because all I wanted is good star color. In 5 minutes, most stars are going to saturate the detector anyway. But anyway, I did not want any of the nebulosity. I wanted the nebulosity to come from the narrowbands. So I took relatively short, maybe a total of an hour and a half, 3 times 30 minutes and 5 times 6 minutes for each, RGB exposures. And then my narrowband exposures were typically 30 minutes each. And I could take up to, dozens and dozens of hours of narrowband data to pull out what I wanted to pull out. I was never the type of person to try 45 or 60 minutes, because if you only have 4 hours at your target that night and you can get 8 30-minute exposures, that's great. Now, let's say a big plane goes through one of them and just trashes it, or something else has a problem. All right, so now I have 7 instead of 8 30-minute exposures. But if you have 4 1-hour exposures and you lose one of them to that same airplane, you've lost 25% of your data. And I just never wanted to go there. So that's what I did over the years. Very long narrowband exposures, a lot of them, and very short RGB exposures just to get good stars. Composition, well, what you're taught for landscape photography, you have a foreground, a middle ground, and a background. Well, not so easy in astrophotography. Everything is in focus. There is no foreground, middle ground, and background. I mean, it's a 2D image. And there's no such rules as rules of thirds where your eye is drawn to a certain point in the frame. Well, no, if you've got a spiral galaxy, 9 out of 10 times you're going to put that dead center in your frame, unless you have another galaxy somewhere else that you're trying to capture. And the other thing is stars are round. This is a good and a bad thing. Pixel peepers. So, when I learned astrophotography, the first thing I did is when somebody posted an image, I zoomed into it all the way. And if I saw oblong stars or chromatic problems with stars, I didn't look much further. I just said, okay, nice, thank you. And I do the same thing with Milky Way shots. I tend to zoom right in, and if those stars are little hash marks because they went too long and they weren't tracking, for me, I might be wrong, but for me, it's just not interesting. So to me, when you're an astrophotographer, you look deep because there's all sorts of details. That core of the rosette, you keep digging and there's like a fractals thing. You keep uncovering more and more details that your scope and your system can pick out. So pixel peeping is close to my heart. Okay, image processing, we'll go through this fast. I can probably wrap up in 10 minutes. How's that, Dan?
Sounds good.
Okay. Very faint very noisy. RGB taken separately through filters unless you're doing one-shot color stuff. Need special programs to combine the RGB. You're not just going to go into Photoshop and do it. You'll use Pixinsight or CCD Stack or any one of a number of the newer programs that have come out. It's interesting. I'm looking online and I'm seeing the progression and the sophistication of programs like Pixinsight, but you almost always see on the person's website, I finished it up in Photoshop. I did all my corrections and local adjustments, which, Pixinsight doesn't appear to like to do localized adjustments. They do kind of overall adjustments, and I understand that. But if you want to make the spiral arms a little bit brighter, to make them look a little bit closer than the areas in between the arm, you're going to use programs like Photoshop and Mask and Layers to do that sort of stuff. If you want to shrink the stars, Russ Croman has come out. Russ Croman has waken up, thank goodness for everybody. And he's come out with some amazing software, and he has star reduction software that works as a filter in Photoshop. And it really works quite nicely. So there are masks you can use to make those refinements. It kind of gets you from, like, this is a great image. I give it a 90%, but if you want to get to 95%, in my mind, you need to do all these tweaks. That's just my personal point of view. But the advantage of that is you get to be really good with layers and masks and Photoshops, and it has its advantages.
That's awesome.
Where's the dinosaur and the astronomer with the telescope?
He blew up with the other galaxy that you can't see, but yeah, I didn't get a hole in one on this one. But anyway, Photoshop has its advantages. All right, so this is familiar, I imagine, to everybody. Single 10-minute red exposure. You got to take a flat for the vignetting and the dust donuts. If they're small and really dark, they're probably on the cover slip of your sensor. If they're a little bit larger and open like this, they're probably on your filter. And if they're really big, they're probably on your field flattener. So you need to take flats. And I'm pretty impressed with the new technologies that are coming out that flip kind of closed on the end of your refractor and give you the ability to take a really nice flat. They're motorized, so you don't have to go outside and freeze.
Yep.
That's all great technology. And then, you take your darks that match your lights. And so you can't just combine everything together, because remember, most of us are still dithering. And that means the stars are not superimposed, but our programs are designed to superimpose them. So we align all of our subs and we get a nice master, in this case, a red image. You can see where the red nebulosity is coming through. So you know that this area is probably going to end up being red. So you got your master red here. You do the same thing for green. You do the same thing for blue. You use your color weights that you measured on a G2V star. Then you combine them in one of your specialized programs and do your embellishments, and you end up with, there's all the red that you began to see in the red exposure. And there's the O3, there's the O3 coming through the green and the blue filter right there. And you got your colored stars that are based on the G2V broadband color weights. That's a Wolf-Rayet Ring Nebula in Cygnus. So that's a total exposure of about 13 hours. And I remember back in the 2000s, I was upset with Rob Gendler, who was taking like 2-hour total images. I don't want to go that long. And eventually everybody started doing it, going longer and longer, because we wanted to go deeper and deeper. And what's interesting is what we lack in telescope size, and we're talking about, larger telescopes here. We're not going to compete with you know, the 1 meter scopes and the professional scopes, because they have all the light gathering capacity and resolution, but we have all year long. If we want to sit on an object for a whole month, you know, and get 50 to 100 hours on it, we can do that. We have time in our favor, and we can get deep with that as long as you get past, you know, a certain minimum exposure. So yeah, we have time on our side. We generally don't have aperture working for us because we have what's called pay the bills syndrome. So you've seen this. We all do this. As a matter of fact, your smartphones, like the latest iPhones and Google Pixels, you know, whether you know it or not, that picture you're looking at, if you took a picture, you know, late in the afternoon at night, they're stacking inside there. They're just not telling you they're stacking. And we do the same thing. So that's a 30-minute calibrated exposure. I think that's an 03, 3 nanometer 03 image. That's 30 minutes, processed a little bit. This is what it looks like if you stack 11 of those 30-minute exposures. So you're looking at 5.5 hours. So you're not only bringing out the contrast like we saw on that one slide, you're bringing out some faint nebulosity, so that when you combine it with everything else, there's some of your hydrogen alpha, but mostly O3, but a lot of details. And I think this is, yeah, the northeast corner of the Vela supernova remnant, taken from Australia, southern object. Okay, I think this is the second to the last slide. Rob Gendler influenced me a lot some years ago, in that he didn't just post an image and say, hey, look at my pretty picture and pat me on the back. He was there to educate people. And I really respected that, put my PhD to use. So on my imaging site, astrodonimaging.com, I tried to do the same thing. So here's the object. Here's the constellation. If you want to go there and look at it, here's the RA and the deck. Here are the RA and deck coordinates. So you can center this directly in your system. It's only 3,900 light years away, just kind of a hop, skip, and a jump. But this is important here. This has been cropped, obviously. It's 11 by 11 arc minutes wide. So the brighter core of this planetary is about 5 to 6 arc minutes in diameter. So if you have a 275 millimeter refractor, this is going to look like a fat star in your system. So it's probably not a good object for you. But if you have a C925 or a C11 or an Edge HD 1100 or a bigger scope, this could be something that you might be interested in. So this size kind of tells you whether you might be in the ball game to go into it. And then what I tried to do is the same thing that Rob did. He perused the technical literature. A lot of it is astrophysics, and even though I have a doctorate, a lot of it's over my head. But I try and pick out enough information to explain, why did I spend 15 hours on this object? Why is it important? Okay, it's a planetary nebula. Our sun's going to end that way. What am I looking at here? Are we looking at anything new? Well, some of these faint extensions nobody's ever seen before. So this is a very deep image, and some professionals were interested based on what they see. That's a little side note. If you don't think professionals are looking at our astrophotos, well, you're wrong. They actually do, because if we go deep and we find something that hasn't been researched, they're interested, and they might, propose some time on a bigger telescope. Anyway, so I explained what I did, how I processed the image, and what you're looking at there. In other words, why is it worth your time to look at this image and understand what I'm trying to do? So almost every image on my Astrodon imaging website has this sort of thing, including below here, where it was taken, the number of hours, how many RGB hours, how many narrowband hours, what equipment that I used, that sort of thing. So it's a learning experience, which really makes astrophotography more interesting to me because I want to learn about all this stuff that we're never going to visit. So wrap up. It's a very specialized area of photography, deep sky astrophotography. It's very expensive equipment. 20 years ago, I thought skiing was an expensive sport. Boy, was I shocked when I got into astrophotography. Very expensive equipment. Steep learning curves. You have one learning curve for the equipment, but fortunately, we have people like Pete here who can put systems together, because generally you're putting together parts from a dozen vendors. And it's generally, my rule of thumb was, it's the $100 part that you forgot to order that makes the whole system work. And you might have to wait 2 months to get that part. And you kick yourself while your system lays idle because you don't have that part. And you're never going to get the focus or whatever the part was. Or you got metric threads instead of English threads. So just when you get overconfident and say, yep, I know my system, I got my wiring down, nobody's tripping over my wires and strangling themselves, and everything is fine, I'm polar aligned, and you think, yep, I'm pretty much done. And then you say, well, now what do I do with this data? It looks pretty noisy and faint. So then you've got something that, once you get your equipment to a certain point, you're there, it works. Now you can crank out the data. So that learning curve is steep, but it kind of plateaus a little bit, unlike the post-processing. And that it's like learning Photoshop. You can spend a lifetime learning Photoshop, and the professional Photoshop users know a lot more tricks than you do. And the same thing is true with post-processing here. Look, all the modules and the packages that you're adding in Pixinsight, they get better over time. They make your life easier, but you have to learn and integrate it into your post-processing workflow. So that kind of never stops. But the nice thing about it is this technology advances and our post-processing tools get better, your images get better. You don't have to fight it and struggle with it as much. It does a lot of the heavy lifting for you, so you can focus on the final aspects of it, finishing up and getting it ready to post for the world to critique. And again, this is my term, but I believe what we're doing is technical art. We've left the world of science a long time ago. We're no longer linear stretching our data. We're doing a lot of nonlinear stuff, especially if you go into Photoshop and you use curves, and you bring down the left side of the curve and bring up the right side to improve the contrast. That's nonlinear. So you've kind of left the scientific world behind, but the goal is produce beautiful, deep sky astrophotography art. So that's what I call it. And as I mentioned, it could be useful to professional astronomers as well. And there's a huge variety of objects to image. And when you get tired of northern hemisphere objects and you have a few bucks in your pocket, you can rent some time on a telescope in the southern hemisphere and go after all those pieces of candy that all taste good, but you haven't had a chance to taste them before. And that's what I did. Once I found that I was spending longer and longer time trying to find an object that I haven't imaged in the northern skies. I said, well, let's go down south and see what's cooking down there. So that's what I did. So for the last 10 years of my astrophotography career, I was solely in the southern hemisphere. And there's just some beautiful objects down there to image. It's a rewarding experience. But what I tried to do in the beginning of the talk with a light year discussion and how long it would take to get to even the closest star is, I think astrophotography, to wrap up, is a humbling experience. We're part of something really grand, really ancient, and it takes a lifetime or more to try and understand what we're living in. And I'm not sure we have very good answers right now. but it's great to be part of that. And it's an incredible hobby in that if you're out there freezing cold in New Jersey or in Illinois or something like that at midnight, and you run into a problem, something stopped working, and you realize that everybody else has a job tomorrow and they probably they're long asleep because they got to get up early. Well, people in Europe are in their mid-morning and they might see your post and they might say, yeah, I ran into that 6 months ago and here's how I solved it. So you have a lot of resources out there to go to solve problems that crop up, and they will crop up from time to time. So that's my astro imaging website. I encourage you to visit there and peruse. And that's it, folks.
Awesome.
Thanks for staying up.
Hey, you know what? You had up to 50 people watching us, you know, and you know, really, really great. I mean, it's so much great experience and knowledge that you gave us tonight. There's so many comments on the chat. I couldn't even stay up with it. There was a little off the. And if you could just click off the PowerPoint, I think we're still on it.
Should I stop sharing?
Yeah, you can stop sharing.
Is that what you're asking me to do? Yep. Okay, I'm stop sharing. And toggle screen sharing.
There we go. And I'll put us back on the forum. There we go. Awesome.
So are you guys the only ones that are up?
No. Everybody's saying Sean Nielsen's still on there saying great stuff tonight. Dylan.
Yes,
great
Senthil,
stuff.
great
Mark,
presentation.
AZ4 Runner, Senthil twice. DIY NASA, a lot of people in there. So a lot of people still here. 35 people still hanging out. So
yeah.
I didn't know how the first part of the talk would go because, you know, people are thinking that I'm going to be talking about technical stuff and filters and processing and all that. But I really, as I got older, tried to understand what drew me to astrophotography. You know, why, you know, it's not easy to freeze your ass off, you know, night after night to get data and deal with all the headaches with the equipment. So I tried to kind of address why I did all of these things as opposed to how I did all of these things. And I hope that wasn't too far, you know, off subject.
No, not at all. Not at
but,
all.
You know, when somebody comes to me and says it's only 1,600 light years away, I started thinking about that. What's that person telling me? And then I realized, you know, what that means. And that kind of puts you in place in a little bit.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Thanks, guys, for your help.
No, yeah. We actually have a giveaway we have to do before we go. We have a giveaway for a Masters of Pixinsight class, and their next class is this Tuesday, dialing up the detail, which I believe they're going to be going into talks about Russell Croman's Blur Exterminator. And, you know, it's going to be cool. So I'm going to go to that one. So let's see. I actually, you know, you don't have to wait for me. I had some time, so I was able to load up the wheel. So you don't have to wait for me. So I'm gonna share the wheel real quick. And again, this is for a free Masters of Pixinsight class. So and again, the next class is Tuesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern. So free class. Here we go.
And who is it?
And the winner is Nigel. Nigel. I believe that's Hogarth, if I remember. Hogarth's Astronomy. So Nigel, congratulations, and I'll send you an email. So Mr. Pete Proul will get back to you on how to redeem your voucher for a free Masters of Pixinsight class. So congratulations. And we will be continuing to give out one a week until the end of 2023. So
that's awesome.
One a week and one free IP for AP year subscription every month till December. So
that's great.
So yeah, that's awesome. Thank you again to Masters of Pixinsight for supporting the channel.
And we'll get the first set of the brand new Astrodon filters to be given away on AstroWorld when they come out.
Honey, how much money do we have to make?
I think
you got to go back into production.
Yeah, I think when that happens, we'd end up breaking the internet. At least we break our website.
Don, hey, listen, you know, Prima Luce made a Black Eagle for us. I mean, you can make a set of filters for us, right? Yeah.
No problem.
Just kidding, Don. It's a pleasure having you on, and you know, it's you know, I'm sure I speak for everybody in the chat. I mean, just to have you on the show is just great, because, you know, knowing you and your filters and using your filters for so many years, it's an absolute pleasure having you. So
it was great being here. I enjoyed it. Great questions. Yeah.
Hey, Don, was this the book that you were talking about?
You mean
with
this book?
Ron? Because that's where I learned Photoshop, was with that book, because that was the only processing was really back then was with Photoshop, and this literally was the Bible for Photoshop. That's funny.
I traveled down to a ranch. I can't remember the name of it, but they all went there in the early 2000s with I think a C11 and, you know, minimum equipment. And I came home with an image of the Crab Nebula. And Ron was down there. He was training me. So we flew down to, just can't remember the ranch, but Doug George from Diffraction Limited and a bunch of people that, you know, they were trying to bring out the desktop universe at the time. They were down there, the Yorks there, who ran Anacortes, you know, and sold a lot of astrophotography equipment. They were down there. They're known for having these big wild macaws. And so they were down there. We had hot chocolate with all of these really well-known people at 2 a.m. It was freezing out there, but I came home with Ron's help with an image of the Crab Nebula, which is pretty doggone cool the first night out.
Was that the Riverside astronomers, or was that like Mount Pinos?
No, this was almost on the Mexican border in Arizona. I think it was called the Sundance Ranch or something like that. And that's where these well-known people in astronomy and astrophotography gathered. There's some pretty well-known people back there. And I was sitting, we had a 50-foot extension cable going from our room with the door cracked where the tripod was out in the middle of the hotel, you know, the middle of the grounds of the hotel. But it worked.
That's funny. All right. Well, we're at 2.5 hours. So yeah. So Don, thank you so much. And we usually we just do a final thought. We do a run around at the end of the show. So like a little you know, Jerry Springer final thoughts thing. So Eric, final thoughts for tonight?
Again, Don, thank you for spending time with us. We really appreciate it. I know the viewers in the chat, they appreciate it. I learned quite a bit, so thank you. And no, just again, another great show. And don't forget, next week, Reach for the Stars. We would really appreciate your support, because it's not about us. It's about helping out these kids and helping out these wonderful people who are helping these kids dealing with mental illness, depression, anxiety, and so many other things. And they're doing it through astronomy. And I think it's absolutely amazing. So don't forget next week. So really appreciate the support in advance.
Absolutely. Pete?
No, just always a great show. And Don, I'm so glad that you came on. This really was a very informative. The presentations were phenomenal. your imaging. I mean, the
Yeah.
quality and the post-processing. I mean, think about it, just with Photoshop, amazing. Always absolutely been amazing. I mean, I can remember meeting you the very first time down there at the, remember Craig Weatherwax used to have his little social
Oh, yeah.
down there at Ocean. I can remember
It
meeting you
was
the
called
first time back.
STAE. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
it, you know. But as I said, thank you for coming on the show. It was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Don, you got a final thought for us, or
Keep processing. Keep imaging. Yeah.
Very, very close to our tagline, and you know, so everybody, thank you so much for hanging with us for the past 2.5 hours for the first show of 2023. Thank you, Don, again for coming on and being part of the first show of the year. And it'll be a pleasure to have you come back on whenever you choose to come back. If you want to come back and hang out with us, you're more than welcome. So
clear skies, everybody. Cielos despejados.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I believe that was Spanish, but you know, I'm not.
Yes.
Sí, yo hablo español. Por un gringo estoy bien. So, everybody have a good night, and please don't forget next week for RFT Stars fundraiser. Come and hang out with us and help support a really, really great cause. It'd be really appreciated. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night, and remember, as always, keep imaging, keep educating, and clear skies. And we'll see you next time, Friday night on AstroWorld. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Everybody.